semnol kake mo faseda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm Matterall. With me today is Elise.
Hello.
Hey, Elise. We got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about the war in the North and give you a rundown of how it began, what happened in it, and how it ended, and then what the ramifications were of that. So we're going to do a complete look at that Northern War. It just happened that really ended with the demise of a coalition in the game. And we're also going to talk about something that's just started this last week. We were expecting it, but it actually finally started to happen. So it's not really a surprise when we have Exuki here to talk about that. That is a Wormhole eviction of his corporation, a very large corporation in Wormhole space. And we'll talk about that as well. And then when we have, at the very end, we're going to talk a little bit about the CSM Summit and some of the stuff that we could extrapolate from the messages we've been hearing from them. So with that, Elise, how are you doing? Elise? I assume he fell off his stool. Elise, are you there? Okay, that's odd.
Went MIA.
Yeah. Oh, he's talking. He can't be heard though. Sorry. We'll come back to Elise. Anyway, let me introduce the guests. We have with us today, Killer B. How you doing?
Hey, doing good. Having a nice Sunday.
All right. Also with us is also with us today is Exuki. How's it going, Exuki?
It's going good. It's been a busy week. I got back right from the summit and jumped straight into a war, so that was fun. And I think it'll be fun, though. I can touch on some stuff about the summit. It was a really good summit, though, so I think both I'll vaguely touch on some stuff that I probably can touch on, and just note that I think the next several weeks are going to be good.
Excellent. We've been hearing nothing but praises about you and your ability, your contributions, I should say, to CSM. So it'll be good to hear that too. Okay, so let's get started, Killer B. We got to talk about this war in the North. We've been reporting on it for months. And can you tell us why it started and how it started?
Yeah, it's been going on for a month. So we started it in, I think, late last year, probably like October, November. The reason we started going after Tino and Branch and basically going after that coalition was because prior to that, we obviously were kicked out of Tribute and Veil of the Silent. And while that was in progress, Sword Dragon has decided to make some moves that we didn't like. Basically ended up siding with the Imperium, which wasn't unexpected, but yet we wanted to punish him for it, right? And we were sitting in drones where we had set up our new home, and we were looking for the best content to go for. And obviously, Tino was very close for us, very easy to get to. So we started the deployment into SF Tech or STech F. I don't exactly know the system name. I think it's SF Tech, which is right on the border to Cobalt Edge, and it's the very southern system of Team, I guess you could say. And we started a little guerrilla campaign at the start where we would just go out on a day-to-day basis, just entosis a bunch of systems, and then we would watch how they respond to the entosis timers, and we would, respond accordingly. Most of the time we wouldn't take any big fights because at the start of the campaign our numbers were really small and theirs were really big, especially in their prime time, which at the time was the Chinese time zone because of their allies in Siberian Squad and Ranger Regiment. And we just kind of kept that going. We kept the pressure up. We kept reinforcing stuff, and we started slowly chipping away a bunch of IHUBs in Tino. Then with New Year's, we started to pick up a lot of momentum. After the Christmas break was over, we started to go a bit harder. We started to push for timers in other time zones. We wanted to try and get some EOTZ timers, which isn't exactly possible when the defender gets to choose when his stuff comes out. But we still managed to get some engagements going in EOTZ, and we won most of them very comfortably. And then something really important happened. I don't actually remember exactly when it was. I think it was like late January, probably early February. Goons announced that they were doing a deployment to Vino to get content, basically. And at the same time, we had managed to get FRT to deploy up to us and help us out with the war. And that was a really big deal because we weren't really able to make strategic victories happen because, for example, all the keep stars, all the important IOPs were timed for, say, 1400 ETH time. And that is a very inconvenient time for NC and PL because we don't really have people around that time, not many anyways. But with FRT joining the war, that was a big deal because now we suddenly started having the upper hand, even in China TZ. And we started making some big progress. And from that point forward, it went really fast. We kind of started killing Keepstar iHubs. We then started going after Keepstars, and they didn't really put up much of a defense at that point because it was kind of over. We were outnumbering them now in every single time zone, and we were obviously had the upper hand when it came to super caps. We started rolling Tino, we started rolling Branch, cleared up all of the structures. And last week we moved into Decline, and today, literally like 20 minutes ago, we just killed the last Keepstar in Decline, which puts the final tally up to 9 Keepstars, by the way, that have been killed during this campaign, which is a lot. It's the most Keepstars that have ever been killed in a single campaign.
Wow.
And yeah, that was pretty much the war. There was a couple big battles in the war. I don't think any are really worth mentioning. There were no like major battles that swung the war. It was mostly political movements and people getting involved that made this war happen or like go the way it did. There was like no one big battle like a couple years ago, UALX, right? That was like the battle that turned the tide of the war. There was nothing like that this time around. It was mostly just we were not being able to contest them in their prime time, and then suddenly we were able to contest them in their prime time, and that just kind of made the war do a 180, and suddenly we were just rolling over them.
There was a big shift in momentum though at one point. I think it was in the beginning of February where the Panda Fam side I guess dropped the hammer, right? I think it was in a Tino timer, and then I think like maybe that's not like the big battle where it seemed like everything was over. But that did definitely send a message to everyone that was like on the sidelines or wasn't quite sure. Like that's definitely when the momentum was outside of the Dead Coalition's favor, and you could kind of see the writing on the wall that they were not going to be lasting that much longer.
Yeah, there was this one big battle that was basically Goons. I mentioned this earlier. Goons deployed to Vino, and a lot of people were expecting Goons to help a lot in the defense of the GOTG regions or Dead Coalition regions. And there was this one big timer over a Siberian squad Fortizar in Venal, actually. And we decided to go all in on that, even though it had no strategic significance, really, because it wasn't Venal, right? But Goons formed up really big for that one. So did GOTG. Basically, everybody formed as big as they could. And we dropped the hammer on that timer. We managed to win the timer. And that sort of gave us the confidence as well to know that even with Goons being up here, our campaign isn't really being slowed down or anything. We can just proceed as we did before, and whenever Goons show up to a timer, we just drop the hammer, right? It turns out they didn't even show up for any Branch or Tino timers at all. They just went and fought hard 24/7 in their staging system. But yeah, that was pretty much the story of that. So that was like, I guess, the most important battle, as Elise said, that definitely gave us a lot of momentum. And from that point forward, it happened pretty quickly. We killed one Branch Keepstar, or Tino Keepstar. After that, GOTG announced the full retreat out of Branch and Tino. They moved all their alliances into Decline. And then before we even started pushing onto Decline, while we were still grinding Branch, killing all the structures, big structures in Branch, Siberian Squad announced that they were going to leave that coalition to join Legacy or Fire Coalition, whatever, basically go towards Test. And then also Ranger Regiment announced they were leaving that coalition to join the Imperium. So like now the two military backbones of Sword Dragon's coalition had broken off, and we knew at that point it was over. We obviously wanted to finish the job, which is what we did this weekend. They managed to unanchor, I think, 1 or 2 Keepstars that were in Decline, but we've killed 4 of them, which is good. So yeah, now it's and then. Well, like actually, I don't know when that happened. Like 1 or 2 days ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago. Sword Dragon also announced that Darkness was disbanding and their corps are breaking off. Most of the Darkness corps joined Initiative Mercenaries, and yeah, that's basically where they're going.
There is one interesting little wrinkle in there or one interesting part of this story that at least I find really, and that's Legacy. Well, I guess not Legacy's involvement, but Test Alliance's involvement. They're not really good friends with either NC. Or PL, and especially when Fraternity got involved, they were like the last major war in EVE Online. So Test, like, they wanted to punish Darkness as well in the Dead Coalition. So is it right to say that they just spent all their time in Declan just harassing them in the backlines and like just destroying infrastructure while the fight was going on?
Yeah, I definitely did not give Test enough credit in my summarization. Test obviously played a big factor in being annoying and Decline, and also for some of these big timers that we had up in the north in Tenal and Branch. Test created timers at the same time in Decline, which then forced that coalition to choose between do we go for the timer in Branch or do we go for the time on Decline? And Decline being their home, obviously they went for those, and that was a big deal. It was actually really enjoyable working with Test. As Elise mentioned, we aren't particularly good allies or anything, but this campaign, I would say, certainly improved the relationships between Test and NC and PL, I would argue, because we've worked with them a couple times and it worked really well every time.
You and Billy were kind of the all-stars, like the all-star duo in World War B or the Casino War, or whatever we want to. Like, you guys were the main FCs there, and so it's kind of interesting for me, at least, to see you guys working together again, at least in some capacity. Like I said, there's not a lot of good blood between the two groups as of late, but
yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Why not, at least? Like, what happened between Test and NC? Because I know there was a thing between Test and PL, but NC too?
I mean, NC and PL are bros, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
We both shot them equally.
We both shot them. Horde too, I guess.
Horde's involvement in this campaign was also significant. Obviously, Horde has the capacity to field huge numbers when they want to, and for all the big important timers, Horde did show up with big fleets. So Horde has always been a big deal. Also, Horde, which is something I have a huge respect for. Simultaneously, they're also taking care of all the people at home in drones, ratting and mining. They're doing their best to help crabs that are being tackled by people. So Horde is basically doing two I don't want to say fronts, right? Because Horde actually never really deployed any major forces into the north. They kind of always came up from their home regions, which is not that long because it's not that far away because we have a good jump gate network, but still, they basically took care of our home space while also participating in this campaign. So yeah, it was definitely significant. But I think the most important part was definitely FRT, VVV, and MSN, which are three. FRT, I think I don't have to explain who that is, but VVV and MSN are fairly new to TQ, but they're both very big. They've grown incredibly big over the last couple of months, and they're both very much strong Chinese alliances now as well. So those three Chinese alliances siding with us definitely gave us the advantage we needed to make this happen.
Yeah, for the longest time, Dead Coalition, which is Sword Dragon's coalition, had like a very strong holding in their area because they had basically all of the China time zone unified under one coalition. And then, in 2018 and 2019, you saw, I don't want to say cracks, but you saw like other groups not necessarily going under his banner, or the biggest probably being Fraternity. And then VVV, and then Army of Mango and stuff like that. So you actually had like this outlet for Chinese players to go to other groups as well. And, once that time zone dominance faltered, then that's what the coalition really had going for it. It didn't have like huge numbers. It didn't have stuff like that, or massive wealth. They were decently wealthy. They had good numbers, but their biggest claim to fame that made them like unconquerable was their time zone dominance. So when that kind of became a moot point, that's kind of when the cracks started forming. But we talk about the Chinese time zone. Fraternity, are they going to move into like some of the conquered lands here in like Tino? Is that their plan?
As far as I know, the plan is to rent it out. I think that VVV and MSN are going to stay in Tino, and then Branch is going to be rented or something. But I don't exactly know what FRT is planning with the space. I think that FRT proper is going to stay in Oasa, where they've been living ever since they left wherever they previously lived. So I think FRT is going to stay in drones, but they're trying to do something with the space.
I think they were in Omist, and they've been ratting the hell out of. They're not.
No, they're in Oasa.
No, they were.
Omist. Oh, they were.
They were in Omist, I think. Yeah.
FRT? I don't think so. I think there was somebody else in Omist.
I'll check it out. But for sure they're in Oasa now, and they're ratting the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the MER, it's pretty impressive what they're able to do when they're not going to war. They're all just trying to build their war chest, and you really see it when you see their super cap numbers. I'm sure, Gil, you can see it better than anyone when they have super cap ops. We're talking about a year ago they had like 9, or 2 years ago they had like 9 supers, and last year they had quite a bit more. They had like a super fleet that was respectable, but now their super fleet is just a normal Alliance's super fleet. It's huge.
For the first big start timer and branch that we actually thought could be contested, FRT I think formed 120 Titans, and that was just Titans, right? So there was super carriers and stuff on top of that. So yeah, they're massive. They're definitely putting that money to good use.
My goodness. And so obviously they've been doing a lot since their war in or since their war in the South between Legacy and their Winter Coalition. Other big winners that you mentioned were Fire or Legacy, whoever that group goes to, and the Imperium, who picked up Siberian squads and Rager Regiment respectively. Like those are like, do you want to talk about them at all, or?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that so Siberian Squad was the alliance I probably respected the most of the entirety of that coalition. They were, in my eyes, the military backbone of the coalition. And Hanzo, who is their main FC and also their alliance leader, he fought tooth and nails until the very end, right? Like he formed up every day for almost all the timers. And Hanzo is a good FC as well. He was one of those FCs where when we had 2 similar sized Munin fleets and we were fighting each other, the fights were always pretty even. There was no clear winner. So that was yeah, he is Matero, to answer your question in podcast. So that was a big deal. So I think that Legacy or Fire, whoever SBSQ end up going to, definitely gained a huge powerhouse in terms of strength. They are very strong in Russian time zone, and they have and Hanzo's a very good FC. So yeah, and then obviously for the Imperium as well, they have a lot of the people. We have to say this, I guess. A lot of the people left RR as well and ended up joining FRT doing all of this, but still the portion of RR that went to the Imperium, that's still a big boost to the Imperium's Chinese time zone. And I feel like whenever that next big war is going to happen, if it ever happens, I think the Chinese time zone is going to be the time zone that it's going to happen in, because all like the power scales are so set in stone for most of the time zones. In EU and US, the power scales are completely set in stone. You can easily say which are the most powerful alliances in EU and US. But in Chinese time zone right now, it is kind of difficult to say because FRT is huge. Goons have a pretty big Chinese time zone as well. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, during the I think during the year in review podcast, when we had Andy Groen on, Matterall and I were talking about, I think the next few years in EVE Online is going to be all about the Chinese groups. And, one of these days they're going to realize that they don't need to be allied with any of the the Western groups. They can just band together and dominate on their own.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks for that big update, Killa. I know we kind of tried to compact months worth of stuff into a couple minutes there, but I think you got everything kind of perfect. So really appreciate the update. Congrats on killing the last keep star that just popped, I think, or is popping right now.
It popped, yeah. It popped like an hour ago-ish.
Nice. Not many. There are not many areas for firsts in the game anymore after being around for almost 20 years. So the fact that you're able to get a first with the most amount of keep stars killed in a campaign still shows your dominance. So congrats for that. You should get some well-deserved kudos.
All right. We're actually we're going to have a little bit of a change here. We're going to bring in some extra folks to talk about this next topic. Is there anything else, Elisa, you wanted to cover with the Northern War? We really wanted to get all that.
Oh no, I think Killa nailed it. It seems he put a bow on it.
Okay, so at least tell me what's going on with you, so that I have a few more seconds to arrange this. But I actually wanted to catch up with you. How's it going?
It's pretty good, actually. I've been kind of goofing around in EVE Online. I don't have the time to play as seriously as I usually like to, so I've been trying to find some goofy side projects and kind of look out for smaller stories that we might not have.
Yeah, there was one that we were talking about, or I pointed out that I want to investigate or look into, which is really interesting. And they were RPing that there were troops on the ground on planets of this one system in, I think it was Metropolis. And because they're RPing soldiers on the ground, they have EVE support ships in space. And so they're kind of fighting it out. And so there's a bunch of kills in that low-sec system in Metropolis, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's Flowswin is the system. But yeah, the RP community is super vibrant now. It's something you couldn't say really this time last year. I mean, this time last year was starting to kind of get some attention. But CSM Delegate Zero, I don't think he gets any credit for it outside of the RP community, but he's more or less single-handedly revived the RP community in the last 16 months or so. And now he doesn't really have to do all that much work, and the RP community still goes on ticking. So we did see them, we had a great story with Deep Spar from Electus Matari, who they told their story about the big high sec war that they had that branched out into basically every facet of EVE Online, right? They were involved in the war in the South. They were doing stuff in nullsec. And all those guys are role players. So shout out to CCP Delegate Zero and presumably his team, but I have a feeling it's just him. He's like the big lore nerd over at CCP.
All right, one quick comment from Pew. What is this? Get at least to update us on Oddworld. That an inside joke?
Oh, so when EVE Online was getting DDoSed, I was basically the last region of the game that could access it. So while everyone was playing, it was me that was stuck on a screen saying you can't log in or get stuck in space. So because I'm an addict, I was playing RimWorld, which is a very fun game. If you guys haven't checked it out, you should. And I named all my little colonists after EVE alliances. So I was kind of playing out my EVE fantasies in RimWorld, and some very... The characters have completely random interactions, right? So just some really ridiculous and also somehow fitting things happens. So I think one of the things was Horde and Darkness, like those little colonists were married, but then Horde cheated on Darkness with Fraternity by complimenting Fraternity's forehead, which I don't get how that works, but like the interactions between all the bonds. And by the end, I had like basically every alliance I could think of represented in there.
That is hilarious.
NC Dot tragically died very early on to Raiders, but everyone else was represented.
That's wild. All right. We'll have to get a rundown on the whole story later on. Okay, so this next area we have some new guests. Actually, of course, we have Exuki here, who's part of TIS, very much at home here. It's good to have him on. We also picked up some FCs from Hard Knocks, and we're going to have them on at the same time, which is not something we normally do because generally people can disagree, get heated, and shut each other off, and it's not a good experience. So we have usually people on one show, and then we bring the other side on a different show, and that way people get their say. But today we're doing it, and we're going to do it live. So we have Laura Secco with us. How's it going, Laura Secco?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me back again. Is my mic all good? I've not checked it today.
Sure, thanks for coming. And we also have Victor Volman.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for coming on. I'm going to start with Exuki. He has home court advantage because it's his hole that's being evicted. But I will just set it up with this.
Well, it's actually both our holes that are being evicted if we want to get technical.
That's true.
We'll get to that. Okay, so there is for those that haven't heard, there is a massive struggle going on in Wormhole space right now. And it is over the system known as Solaris, or J164430. And that is the home of Scary Wormhole people. Exuki is the leader of that group. So we'll start there. Exuki, tell us what's going on, how it started, what some of the background is.
So our corporations are, both our corp and Hard Knocks have been in Wormhole space for quite a while. I would say, and they probably won't disagree with me on this point, that our corporations have rarely seen eye to eye, and there's for sure some animosity between our crews. I think that's built up over some time, and towards the end of this past towards the end of this past week, Hard Knocks, along with allies from Hole Control, Inner Hell, and Laserhawks, showed up in our home C5, which we call Solaris, with the intention of evicting us via the destruction of all of the assets that we have in system.
Right now, what is there a background to this? And actually, I invite now Laura Secco and Victor to come in too. Let's have a discussion about this. It seems like Inner Hell has been on a tear, just kind of evicting everybody in their path. Now, we had him on the show a few weeks ago. For those that wants to see that interview, check that out. That episode is called "Encountering Inner Hell," and we talked to them, and they said they really are just looking for a match, like a fight. And if you can stand up to them, because that's what they're looking for. But in the process, they're swamping and eliminating people in Wormhole space.
So that's it's a very general comment on evictions. So I'm going to address evictions in general rather than specifically focusing on Exuki's corp to start with. So every single PvPer in this game wants to commit non-consensual PvP, right? We all hunt ratters every day and try and kill Rorquals, right? And we're upsetting the Rorqual pilot because he doesn't want to die. We all do it. We all enjoy non-consensual PvP, that high-stakes gameplay. Basically everyone in the game. Evictions take this sort of experience and dial them up to 11. An eviction, it's the perfect stakes. It's the perfect storm of high stakes, intense planning, impactful decision making, and the sort of the butterfly effect, every pilot matters moments that really do bring Eve alive. Like, everybody loves this sort of gameplay. Evictions are fun content, attacking or defending. I'd almost liken them to a package deal nullsec war, imagine all of the sort of commitment and hard work that goes into a months-long nullsec campaign, except it's compressed into 3 or 4 days. And you take the time off work and you just go in, you get it done, and you come out and you've had a full-on EVE Online warfare experience in that time. And that experience is fun for both sides. Exuki will agree we've had some incredible fights, albeit we've had more people on our side just because of how whole control works. But at the end of the day, people are very opposed to evictions because it's mean to evict people. But this is EVE Online. We're always mean to each other. I've never really bought into that. I don't really expect to deny my members' content just to follow some bushido list of rules. We follow them to an extent. We tend to try and not get nullsec involved, but for the most part, I'm not going to do it because someone's whining on Reddit about us being unfair. We're always going to evict people. So this is why we evicted TDSIN. This is why we've been evicting other groups in the past. It's why we constantly expect to be evicted, as we currently are, and it's why we're going to continue to evict after today.
Yeah, and you were... Let's be clear. Eviction doesn't mean that you're drummed out of the hole or pushed out of the hole. It just means everything in your home base, your home system, is destroyed, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
But normally you can stick around and rebuild.
Yeah, so you can safe lock freighters with all your assets in. Losing evictions doesn't automatically kill corps. Sure, some corps die when you evict them, but in the same way corps die when you evict them from nullsec, or they feed too many radders to a concentrated cloaky camping campaign. Weak corps die for all sorts of reasons. Dying to an eviction isn't a completely uniquely awful fate. It's akin to a lot of other failures in EVE. It does push some corps to the limit, but it certainly doesn't deprive Wormhole space from content. To list a few corps as an example, Stranger Danger, Posby, Mouth Trumpet Cavalry, even us, we were evicted 2 years ago. We've all come back still kicking, some of us even stronger than ever. Your guests that were on 2 weeks ago in Match Roll, I believe his name was Moonlord from Is It Really Us? I think his group was called. Yeah. That were victim to a Hard Knocks eviction. This is a really good example of how a corp should treat an eviction, because it was quite a close fight, but in the end we had more forces and we had a better strategy. And I sat down to watch your show thinking, oh, this is all going to be good. There's going to be loads of salt about how much they hate us. But instead I sat down and listened to Moonlord break down the fight, realize that it was winnable had they played better, and they had a new fort anchoring in a few days and they were already PvPing again. They actually killed some of our DSTs a few days ago. So for the record, shout out to that guy for his commentary on the show following the eviction, because that's really an example of the right way to learn, respond, and rebuild after an eviction. Okay, so paint for us a picture of what's going on in Wormhole space, because it definitely seems different now than it has in the past. Is there any difference between what's happening now and what's happened in the past? And by that, I mean, is Inner Hell and your group, HK and Laserhawks, are you guys cleaning out, evicting more people than usual?
No. So generally speaking, Inner Hell has been doing more evictions lately. I guess you've been on the show in the past, so they'll explain to you, right? But like they're doing their own thing. We generally speaking don't do that many evictions, right? Like we keep it at one big eviction every half a year, maybe a year. This is one of those big evictions. So we're not by any means cleaning out Wormhole space. We're just looking for a good eviction, and TDSIN happened to be our target. We're not doing more evictions than usual lately. The only difference is that we are on friendly terms with Inner Hell now, and so we're bringing them along for our big eviction.
So that was Victor. You're now friends with Inner Hell, but didn't you guys destroy their Keepstar not that long ago?
Yeah, I think Laura should comment on that.
Yeah, didn't PL and NC kick test out of Solve 2 years ago? We destroyed Inner Hell's Keepstar 2 years ago. Diplomacy is as fluid in Wormhole space, even more so than it is in nullsec. We all break up and then make friends and then break up again all the time, just like anywhere else in EVE. Yeah. The reason I ask is we asked, I think it was Tori Shepard from Inner Hell when she was on the program, and she said, nope, we're not friends. They destroyed our Keepstar. And then it seems like a week later, you guys are working together. So I thought, wow, that's pretty quick change. So there might be some rivalries in the past, But as much as putting those rivalries aside, Inner Hell's leadership are very good at the game. They're very good to work with. Like, just even with the language barrier, they're a good group of people to work with. Their leadership, they do things properly. We can rely on things to do stuff. As an example, after a huge fight that we had yesterday with TDSIN, Inner Hell looted the field completely before we'd even really thought about looting, and we thought, oh, okay, well, they can just keep it. And Inner Hell leadership contracted us the entire amount of loot without we didn't ask them for it. They just gave it over because they knew we'd put so much money into the eviction. That's the sort of attitude Inner Hell bring to evictions when they're on them with allies. They're a very good group to work with.
Yeah. Now let's go back to Exuki. Let's just go. Maybe we should just run down what's happened up to now. Can you walk us through?
Sure. So the eviction started off Thursday, like early Thursday afternoon, Eve time. So our wormhole had a frigate connection to a class 2 wormhole that after some finagling we were able to bring allies into, since as is almost always the case, the initial force that came in was relatively overwhelming, and so we took an opportunity to try to bring in some people that were offering help. That day, the starter day was relatively uneventful. Besides that bit, the attack, Hard Knocks rolled in. They dropped a Fortizar along with several Raytarus as their staging beachheads, and then they had a pretty impressive fleet hanging out, keeping the system locked down the best they could. It was off time zone for us, so there was really no chance there was ever going to be, a flashpoint skirmish starting right from the get-go. After that, I'm a little shaky on some of the first bits because I wasn't actually there. I was still in the CSM Summits when this was going down, so I had to just delegate everything to people. We got some allies in. We then threw, we sent a fleet out and tried to get a fight on the first night, but the attackers opted to back off and let us control the entrance. And what hindsight being, of course, is we're just sitting here wishing we'd gotten way more people in when we had control of the wormhole. The next day, they retook whole control. A fight was had, and I wasn't there again, so they can disagree if they want to as well. But my guys are telling me that the feeling was that the fight was going pretty even-handed and things were blowing up on both sides. And then Fraternity showed up and significantly shifted the overall scale of the fight, and after that we bled a lot of the carriers in the fleet that was going on there and retreated. After that, as far as where that evening though, Fraternity didn't stay. They left, and so we were able to we had another massive brawl, one that I suspect is going to, be the biggest fight of our system at least. Friday evening, in which we undocked our cap fleet. We undocked every subcap we could get a body into, and we had a massive, massive fight taking place on our static to try to reclaim hull control, do as much damage as we could, and try to see if we can beat down the attackers. It was super bloody for both sides. We lost more ISK than they did, but I think both fleets limped home after that fight. But they did hold the field in the end, and then we were we've been licking our wounds since then, so to speak.
Right. I'm going to introduce. I'll just bring in La Loca or Loca. How are you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for inviting me on here.
Great. You're an FC4, the Initiative.
Yeah, loosely. I've recently joined the Initiative. I'm probably better known as being in AFK in Wormhole space. But yeah, I'm with the Initiative on the current eviction ops that are ongoing, yeah.
Great. AFK, I've heard of them. Okay, Exuki, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to bring him in case you wanted to talk about the initiative and stuff. Go ahead, Exuki.
Well, I think, so wrapping up my end of the bit here that we're seeing, I think, so the local and the other guys can speak a lot more too, because I haven't been directly involved in any shape. Yesterday afternoon, the kind of next wrinkle to the whole thing was that the initiative moved a fleet into Hard Knox's home system of Rage, and began assaulting their system while ours is also burning. This happens somewhat often with some evictions every time here and there, although I think this is probably the first time I've seen it actually go beyond just some tickling with the hopes of pulling people out. A large chunk of the Hard Knocks fleet left our system to go return to theirs. Sadly, not enough of them to, I think, make an enormous difference. If you guys want to pull out Hull Control and Laserhawks too, that'd be cool if you guys wanted to do that, Loro. But even without Hard Knocks in the system, or with a lot of them still missing, I don't think we're still struggling on numbers to really pull that together.
So really quick, before we keep going, I did want to ask the Hard Knocks side just a question that I mean, it was, I think most people had that are completely uninvolved, right? So I'm completely uninvolved in wormholes. You guys are spooky wormhole people. But is the reason for the timing of you guys invading, did it had anything to do with Exuki being going on the summit, or is it just like, yo, no, I found this hole, let's do it now?
Absolutely not. I'll tell you something. So when I came on the show a few weeks ago with Matchroll asked me if I was going to go on the CSM, and my response was, I was thinking about it, but I like Exuki as a CSM, and if he runs next year, there's no point in me contesting, because I think he's a good representative for Wormhole Space. And that was the truth. I still think that Exuki has fought a lot of battles on behalf of all of Wormhole Space. I do agree with that. The CSM Summit timing, Exuki can confirm this. When was the CSM Summit dates announced? It was sort of a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance. He posted telling people when the CSM Summit was. We had 40 carriers in TDSIN's home in that C5 for the Armor Timer fights. It takes months to seed that many carriers into a C5. We planned this a very long time in advance. The op was posted a month ago for our members. I believe it was posted early February. And the reason, once we found out about the CSM Summit, we thought this is a disaster. If Exuki's at the CSM Summit, firstly, he can bat phone all of these new friends he's making, which turned out to actually happen. And secondly, TDSIN is going to be more cautious, which they were. They onlined all of their pauses. So for the first 24 hours, we didn't have a pause in the eviction. The reason we didn't delay, I really wanted to delay. The reason we didn't was because you guys are Americans. We're mostly European. When we announced the op so early so that our Europeans could take time off work to attend timers. And if we delayed, we'd screw over our line members. That's why we kept the date. So I would say I feel bad about the timing, but it screwed us over more than it screwed Exuki over. So I feel bad for our guys about the timing. We should have just delayed, but...
All right, yeah, that's cool. Because that's something that that people who aren't involved in wormholes and who have never done an eviction, they don't have a respect for the timing involved in the planning.
Absolutely, yeah. People have been saying this a lot. I'm going to say it now. I can prove this. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to link screenshots from our ops channels while we're mid-operation. So I can prove it in a few days if people still think that that I'm lying through my teeth. But it was nothing to do with the CSM timing. A few people from Hard Knocks disagree with me about Exuki being on the CSM. A lot of them don't like him. I'm not one of those people. I would not plan an op. And I was a big part of the planning of this op, and none of it was motivated at all by anything CSM related whatsoever.
Yeah, it's another thing that people don't realize about eviction is the massive amount of effort required from the attackers, right? From every, not just from the ops teams, but from every single line member. You need to have control of the wormhole 24/7 and a fleet big enough to contest a hostile fleet, basically, pingable 24 hours a day for the entire duration of the eviction. So it's usually not just, a big eviction is not something you can plan like a week in advance. It's something that you, have to plan months and months in advance and make your line members aware of months in advance, to have those big numbers and all the timers, basically.
I don't want to get sidetracked too much, but one of my favorite pictures coming out of the CSM Summit was Exuki giving a wormhole presentation in what is actually like the CCP boardroom, right? And it's so packed full of devs that people have to sit on the floor to kind of because they ran out of space for chairs. It became very much standing room only. So a little segue, but I thought that was really funny.
Oh yeah, with Exuki standing there explaining. So there's these things called wormholes, right? Just yeah, I've seen the commentary on that.
But it is an advantage, isn't it, at least, and it hasn't happened in the past, that people attack while CSM are in session in the summit because their leaders are away and communication's hard and playing the game is hard. You're not with your computer. You might have a laptop. It's not the same thing.
It's usually not so bad when and I don't want to disparage leadership. It's usually not so bad when the leaders are gone. It's super bad when the FCs are gone. So, like when the FCs are at like a fan fest or an Eve London or something like that, or even there was a few CSMs that have like that were really FC heavy.
So it does happen.
So it does happen, yeah. But that's like the leadership. Okay, it's not the end all be all, right? But the FCs, if they're gone, at least in my experience, if the FCs are gone, it can be quite grim.
Now the other side of that is, if you're in the CSM, like Exuki is, and he gets attacked, can't he just turn to another CSM member and say, "Can you help me out, bro?" Like, you know, they call it the CSM diplomatics or whatever.
I've never had that experience while on the CSM, though I could definitely see where it comes from, right? Because I had like a much better dialogue when I was on the CSM. The Matani was the CSM chair, so I had a much better dialogue with the Matani during that time, and we actually had a bunch of agreements between PL and Goons. Just because I was in more channels with him, so I had like more avenues to talk to him. Yeah. So I don't know about like turning over and be like, "Yo, Karma Fleet,
I'm cashing in my chips."
Yeah, but you're like in a combo with them like all the time. You spend 40 hours a week basically on CSM stuff in the same like channel.
Exuki, what do you think of that? And you're right here and we're talking like you're not in the room, but those guys like you a lot. They say they like you a lot publicly. And it seems like they would be willing to help you out should you need to. Is that
I think that's a super fair assumption that you could make. I mean, you know, it's absolutely true that, you know, as soon as we had a break between sessions and everybody's just chatting about how stuff's going, I just, you know, told a couple people, was like, well, it happened, they're here, because, you know, we were expecting them this week. It was like, hey, it's happened, because I, you know, mentioned it, because actually a couple of them had asked me like, what happens when giant blob of people shows up to come shoot you in your wormhole. So I had talked to them a bunch about evictions before. So, you know, it wasn't like I've heard a couple people imagine that it was that I like just like got up and begged the whole room to come save me. I've heard a couple people accusing me that was how it went down, but you know, that's not how it went. That isn't what happened. But I would be lying completely if I didn't say that, you know, I didn't chat with some of the people there and you know, try to solicit some aid. And as we can probably see, and you can assume, some of it worked because we got some help.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to moderate chat at the same time. Can you tell me, Loka, like how you got involved in this?
Sure. So from our perspective here, we got messaged by TDSIN. We were aware of quite a large numbers advantage towards HK and TDSIN's home, and we wanted to come and have a play. I want to dispel a couple of myths, actually, that I think are going around at the moment. Evictions have always been a numbers game. Since the start of Wormhole Space, it's always been a numbers game. People are trying to get in the hole, then they close the hole to prevent other people getting in, right? It's all about hole control. It's all about preventing numbers and getting your own. Now, in terms of the eviction that was going on with TDSIN, we felt that they statistically had a lot of numbers stacked against them. There was a significant amount of wormhole groups, which, we famously call it the blue donut. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek saying that, but it is true that when Inner Hell, Hard Knocks, and Laserhawks get together, and this time they had Hold Control as well as a few other people, and then they go in and hit somebody, they're pretty defenseless, right? So I think the reason why nullsec groups tend to get involved in this from a wormholer perspective, and now from being inside in it, is because we see these big fights happening, and the numbers have got to a point now, partially because of citadels and the increased security measures, but also just in general with the growing scale of wormhole corps at the moment. I think they are becoming much more on a nullsec level, and that's why nullsec fleets are needed to actually counter that these days. I think it's a little bit of a victim of your own circumstance. If you recruit a lot of people and you have these huge numbers and you go throwing them around, other numbers are going to turn up, right? The other side of things that I want to address as well is there's the free call discussion at the moment, and there's a bit of controversy there because CCP recently amended the hit rolling ability so that you couldn't close free calls, which has allowed a couple of nullsec fleets to get in recently. Okay. A couple, they were quite big, I'll be honest, but they were a couple. It's happening in a way where it's preventing people from being able to close off the hole completely. But I think the main thing and the main reason why there is these nullsec groups coming in the first place is just because of the significant numbers advantage at the start for the attackers. I think if things were on a much more even keel, then there wouldn't be much interest in getting involved. I mean, from my perspective at least, that's how I'm sort of viewing this at the moment. I think every eviction that's ever happened has had some kind of blobbing involved. When HK evicted Inner Hell, there was a huge amount of people involved in that, or when they killed the Keepstar. It's always been that way. Since the start of Wormhole Space, this isn't something new. The free calls facilitate that a little bit better for nullsec groups to get in, but I don't think this is really groundbreaking territory that we're in right now.
You're right.
I would like to disagree a little bit, to be honest, there. Because speaking about like the reason why attackers usually do have a number superiority in evictions, but I wouldn't necessarily say that attackers always have a very unfair advantage. In the last evictions that have happened, and including this one, right? If you look at the numbers in the fights that have happened, of course, after these started badphoning in it, we were very much like gloves off. Like if you're gonna badphone nullsec people, we're gonna badphone nullsec people too. So we brought all these fights to a very big advantage for our side by badphoning nullsec allies. But a lot of these fights, like if you consider just the wormhole groups involved, would have been very even. And I realized that TDSIN managed to get a lot of people in through the help of the initiative, but they could have still gotten a lot of people in, through that same frigate hole where initiative came in from, and we would have had very even fights, right, with no nullsec entities involved on either side. So I think like the whole excuse of they're getting blobbed, so we need to come save them is a bit dumb, right? Because like yes, we had a very big numbers advantage in that time zone. Also mainly due to the fact that every single major group involved in that eviction is EU time zone centric, except for Laserhawks. So we needed a lot of people in EU time zone, like a lot of European, just so we would have more Europeans stay up late for the actual important fights, which will be later on in US time.
Like Inner Hell can only put 15-20 people on field in the time zones of Exuki's armor timers, which is why we batphoned so many, because the majority of our corps can only put good numbers on field in EU time zone. On the first day, for example, we had maybe 250 in fleet when we infilled. By the time the initiative got in with their 200-man fleet, we were down to, I think it was 60 Munins and 20 Scimitars in fleet. So it was about 200 versus 80, which is why we didn't fight on the first day, because we didn't have a pos. As I've mentioned earlier, Exuki's group onlined all of their poses, so we didn't have anywhere to safe up, which meant that if we took a bad engagement, we'd be in a position where we'd be chased around by combat probers, waiting out our aggression timer, trying to safe lock, which is why we didn't engage on the first day. But regarding the numbers thing, it is worth pointing out that yes, Locust got a point about Well, he's entirely correct, honestly, about it being a numbers game. It's always been a numbers game. That's the advantage that the attackers have. You sit down and you calculate what you think the defenders can bring, and you bring the right amount of attackers for that. As an example of an eviction that Exuki's done with the exact same mindset, if Exuki remembers how many people he brought to Vision Inc. in 2016, 2017, whenever that was, which was a whole control corp, which is why they're with us this week. Exuki, I think it was TDSIN, Tempest Legion, a couple other groups that I can't remember exactly who was there. But
we don't talk about that. It was a bad for so many reasons.
Yeah, but the point is that everybody does it, and calling Hard Knocks and Inner Hell the bad guys because we blob is ridiculous. I'm not saying we're the good guys because we do blob, but the only reason we blob is because we have more people than you. If you had more people than us, for the most part, you'd just blob us. Nobody's going to complain about it. I'm not sticking my middle finger up at Goons and Init right now looking at how many people in our home, because they've got more people than us. We got served on a platter to them by CCP. And we should get into the discussion of the mechanic that caused that, actually, about how the initiative and Goonswarm got in.
That's next.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to open this up to all of us. Let's have a discussion. I will stay silent. I'm the least knowledgeable. I've also brought in a fellow CSMer, and that is Olmeca Gold. But I want to talk about the changes recently to CSM. By the way, hello, Olmeca.
Hey, how are you?
Olmeca, good. Okay, so I want to have a discussion on the mechanics for wormholes, and they recently changed and how that's affecting what's going on now, and really just talk about that in any way you guys want.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, there has been some might call it an exploit, some might call it a feature of wormholes, where when you roll a wormhole, I think it's been discussed on this podcast before too. But basically, you would activate the prop mod of your ship after hitting the jump button, and that would add the mass of the prop mod to the ship to the jump mass of the wormhole, which would make rolling holes easy. And that was used for two main things, which was for rolling capital class wormholes in one shot, basically with one carrier going back and forth once, and for rolling frigate holes in a bit more of a complicated way. I won't go into the details, but it comes down to, if you had 4 or 5 devoters or hictors fit in a specific way, you could fairly easily get rid of a frigate hole, 5, 10, 15 minutes. CP then patched this exploit, you could say, or changed this mechanic, basically, making it impossible to use this method of rolling frigate holes. And as far as we can tell, because we've done some testing, unfortunately, there is no technical way of rolling frigate holes anymore. And a frigate hole is a connection that spawns randomly in wormholes. It can lead to other classes of wormholes or to nullsec, or lowsec, I think, too. That allows only frigates and destroyers to jump through and lasts about 16 hours. So what happens basically is, during an eviction where having hole control is incredibly important, where having control of the static to make sure your side can get people in, or your side, and also cannot get people in, is very important. And what gets added is this RNG factor of hoping that a frigate hole doesn't spawn into nullsec, for example, like what happened in our home, where a frigate hole just spawns in the system and anyone that wants can get into your home, basically, based purely on RNG. And in my opinion, it's a very bad thing, because it makes large-scale evictions, or evictions of any kind, I'm not going to say impossible, but not worth it unless you have an absolute massive blob. When you're evicting someone, you're putting in a massive amount of effort, thinking a lot of ISK and supply, stuff like that. People are taking off work, man hours, etc. Only for, in X percentage chance, completely RNG based, where there is no realistic counterplay really, right? Where hostiles can get in however many people they want. And we all know, generally speaking, when you're doing an eviction, bat-phoning defensively is a lot easier than bat-phoning offensively. And if the numbers are 200 versus 200 in an average eviction, the defenders will have the advantage, right? So adding this basically RNG factor that will just make your eviction, your eviction, is a bit of a dumb thing, in my opinion.
Shall we discuss exactly what happened about how the initiative got into the system? I'll sum that up. So at 1600 yesterday Eve time, a frigate hole leading to Delve spawned in Rage, which is Hard Knock's home system. We thought we knew how to roll one. We had a bunch of Higgs destroyers ready to go that we thought would be enough to roll it, because we don't understand exactly how frigate holes work. So, best way to test is to do it when there's a frigate hole. So we potted out 180 people from the TDSIN eviction and burned them all back to Rage, and got into 180 Higgs fit Talwas and tried to roll the wormhole for over an hour, I think. We put through a lot of mass, and it wasn't even reduced. We were unsuccessful. Rolling the frigate hull is impossible. We then proceeded to sit there for, I think, 5 hours, just waiting for the Goon fleet. There was nothing we could do except try and bat phone. Most of our bat phones fell through because Exuki made some friends on the CSM. No Blops wanted to come and help us against Goons, essentially. Not in that time zone, anyway. And Goons came in about 6 hours after we first noticed the frigate hull, and there was nothing we could do about it. They came in with 400 people to our... I think we had 50 Munids in fleet at the time that Goons infilled. There was nothing we could do about it. There was no counterplay at all. Like, we're out trying to make content in Wormhole space, and as a result, we get served on a platter by CCP. Personally, I'm not bitter towards Goons in the initiative. I know some of our members obviously are, but I personally am not. I'm not angry at people like Loka. Like, you took an opportunity and you ran with it. I'm angry that CCP have essentially served us on a platter to you guys twice in 3 days. Like, the frigate hull in TDSIN wasn't the worst thing. We lost hull control directly because of the frigate hull, but there was a little bit of counter there because the frigate hull connected to another wormhole, so we could run a little bit of hull control in that wormhole. But when we got a frigate hull straight to Delve, we could do nothing. We could do nothing to stop 400 people from coming in. It was just a matter of time of when you were going to ping.
I would counter that a little bit just to say we were having a discussion earlier, or I was listening to a discussion on here earlier about how long you need to plan an eviction, right?
Yeah.
If you need weeks to plan something together, the setup is already there. I would sort of say that it is possible to do a reaction fleet based on a frigate hull. I would also sort of say it would also be possible to evict somebody after finding out that their CEO is at a summit. I would put that out there, that it's a possibility, or it's certainly a helpful advantage.
I think we've already clarified that we planned this long in advance of knowing that Exuki was at the CSM Summit. Exuki himself has told me that he knows that it was most likely nothing to do with him being at the summit. We all know
it's either that or the rabbit hole goes even deeper, and Hard Knocks knew when the summit was before.
I would also...
years ago, but I think it's worth dispelling that immediately. We all know that's a ridiculous narrative. Like,
it was certainly an advantage anyway, whichever way you slice it.
It's certainly an advantage in our favor, but you know for a fact that it wasn't planned, Loka. Like, you know for a fact. It was announced 2 weeks in advance. We had 40 carriers in TDSIN home system on the day. You know how long it takes to seed 40 carriers into a C5. It does not take 2 weeks. It takes months.
It doesn't, but it's also possible to have prep in place. But anyway, I'm not here to argue that it happened because of that, because I don't think that's the case, because I know there's enough debate between Light Laser Hooks and Hard Knocks and so on that that sort of eviction was on the table anyway. We saw that when Inner Hell came in and started hitting some structures a couple of weeks ago in TDSIN time. But, you know, that was always on the table. As I said earlier,
I can prove this by leaking some ops screenshots. I'm not going to do it mid-op, but I can post them if you really want to see them. But like, we did not plan it for the summit, and it's ridiculous to keep saying that.
I didn't say at no point have I said that you planned it for the summit. I'm just saying it's an advantage for you, right?
You're implying it, but we'll leave it.
Hold on, let me sort you guys out. Loreka, go ahead and Loraseko, go ahead and finish your point.
So, for a corp with, what are we up to now, Victor? 80 real people, give or take?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah.
But we can put. I think the best fleet that we're putting on field is sort of EU-US crossover. We can put 100 people in fleet. For a corp that can field 100 people in fleet, there's not very many ways that we can afford to prepare to face two alliances that can flash form 200 people each. The initial infills into Rage with 400 I think it was a total of 400 people. There was very little we could do about that. We could batphone more null groups, but as I said earlier, the one sort of bushido thing that I try to conform to in Wormhole space, and by bushido I mean sort of a set of honorable rules that we try and follow in Wormhole space. The one thing that I try and do is not involve nullsec groups. I don't like doing it, especially after we were evicted in 2018 by a nullsec group, and all of these Wormhole groups came to save us on the principle of nullsec doesn't get involved. That's and I try and address that. And we could have planned weeks in advance and approached a bunch of different nullsec groups saying, hey, can you come and have a 1,000 versus 1,000 man battle in our home if we happen to get a frigate hull on this day through random RNG? But it's ridiculous to have to plan that every time we want to leave our home for an eviction. You leave your home so often doing fun ops. Like, if we want to go and do dread bombs, I know AFK were planning to do dread bombs in the past. it's just like, what can we feasibly do? When every time we leave our home to go on an op, there's a threat that a frigate hull spawns and somebody somewhere in nullsec decides, let's go and ruin their day and bring in 400 people. All we can really do is just sort of minimize what we have in our home and blue ball every time they come in. It's going to get ridiculous. Evictions are just going to be not worthwhile anymore. And if you're in wormhole space in a high-class wormhole, you must have enjoyed the eviction content. Look, I don't actually know if you've done many evictions. I know AFK did a fair few while you were in charge there.
I mean, we've done a fair few. I think, well, we've done enough to have experience in it in the same way that you guys have. I think, yeah, I mean, I understand the point, and I understand that there is wormhole bushido, right? We see it in Praise Bob channel, which is a channel for wormholers, for those of you who are listening that wouldn't be aware of it, where there's like a wormhole community, and the wormhole community tends to stick together, and people tend to move between corps. It's quite a common thing. You can track it through for years. The thing the problem that I've got with that at the moment is I think wormholes has changed to a point now where the numbers have hit nullsec levels, just as I was saying earlier. I think the group of people together, having that group together and evicting people with that group is too strong for any other wormhole corp to fight.
See, the other point I would like to make there is there must be a reason why so many groups are evicting TDSIN, right? You're being here like defending TDSIN for being the poor corporation that's evicted by a big blob of wormholers. But if you look at the list of the amount of corporations that are evicting TDSIN, they all have a reason for evicting TDSIN, right? Like, it's not just we're whatever, let's just evict TDSIN, ruin their day, right? Like, we all have a reason.
I'm not mad at TD. Like, I don't want to sit here and defend TDSIN because TDSIN have annoyed me a few times running away from brawls. Sorry, guys, but it's happened. But the thing that really gets me is I don't want to see this whole narrative about dirty nullsecers coming in and ruining our fun because we can't blob alone. It seems a bit odd to me.
We have no, like, in 2015 when we were working with QEX, who were run by the same people running Inner Hell, this coalition existed before in 2015 and we had the same numbers. Hard Knocks actually had more people there. We had 20 more members in 2015. We fielded a similar blob for the Nova eviction, and we were outnumbered almost entirely by wormholers. And in this eviction, even today, there's a lot of wormholers in Rage coming to hit us. This doesn't have to involve nullsec, and the fact that it does just removes from the magic of wormhole space being this enclosed community. It's what we all come and play Eve for. I don't come and play Eve for the huge 500v500 blob evictions. I want to keep things slightly smaller and slightly self-contained. Now, I agree that when you enter someone's home with 200 people in their off time zone, there is some skew there. But the answer to that isn't to give anyone who wants to come in a free full entrance. There has to be a middle ground there, and the middle ground is certainly not just let anyone who wants to come in frigates. I'm wondering what Exuki thinks about frigate hulls. Would he like to put in a comment about them?
Just real quick before we throw to Exuki, it is kind of easy to be, and this is again my outsider's opinion, right? So take that with any grains of salt that you want. It's easy to say like, yo, I live in this area of space. It should only involve this area of people, right? High secers have this feeling, low secers have this feeling, nullsec people don't have this feeling. But that's because nullsec people always go to the area that has, they have the organizational structure in place that they can go to the area that has the fights regardless, right? So if there's something cool going on in low sec, it almost always gets disturbed by nullsec groups because those groups have the most organizational structure.
Could I say something?
Go ahead.
Yes. So one of the big reasons why wormholers are so averse to the whole, nullsecers coming in, because despite what Loka is saying, if you look at the BRs, for example, for all the fights that have happened in TDSIN home, for example, to take it as an example over the past few days, if you remove nullsec groups on either side from those BRs, a lot of these fights are very, very even, right? In all the fights, you could even say that TDSIN would have the advantage. And I realize that the initiative, like the initiative coming in helped TDSIN get their wormholer allies in, right? So that kind of skews things. But still, a lot of these fights are on the even side. And the reason why so many people in wormholes, and I assume in low sec too, I don't know a lot of low secers, but I assume it's similar there too, is why we're so averse to having null secers come in is because, generally speaking, in wormhole space, right, like the fleets, like the fleet we're putting together in the eviction in a coalition that's basically half of Wormhole space, right? You could say half of the PvP corps in Wormhole space are now group right now evicting TDSIN, gets outnumbered 2-1 by one rage ping from the Imperium, right? Like, you can't come here and claim that our fleet is too big, so we want to come here with a rage ping of 400 people, pressure party to make the numbers even. Like, that seems kind of ridiculous.
I would also like to add to what Victor says. I've seen a few comments about the huge 200v200 brawl that we had with TDSIN the other day, where we were brawling face first into each other with very expensive Tempest Fleet issues and Macarials. We both, on both sides, we both agree that was an incredible fight. A lot died. It was a 400 billion-esque battle report. That sort of fight wouldn't have happened if wormholes weren't this enclosed space where we could limit things and we could have a limit on how many people are getting into systems. We wouldn't be fielding. How much are those TFIs costing? 1.5 billion-esque? We wouldn't be fielding 1.5 billion-esque TFIs.
Plus slaves, yeah, so like 2.5 billion.
Yeah, like,
Didn't
we wouldn't
you
be
just
fielding
say
that
like 30 or 40 minutes ago that like everyone loves the joys of like a blob or
we do, yeah.
non-consensual PvP. So like, how can you fault other people for wanting to get in on what you're getting on? They're just,
I would like to clarify.
They're just now able to do it.
Let me clarify my point, at least. I'm not faulting Nullsec here. I absolutely appreciate, like as I said before, I absolutely appreciate Goons and Init wanting to come in and crash the party. I have no hard feelings towards any of them. I've been on Pando's podcast. Like, I like the dude. It's what I don't like is CCP giving them the tools to do this with no effort. If there was counterplay for the way that Nullsec were getting into wormholes, I'd be less bothered, because then we can invest a little more time and effort into addressing some counterplay.
And that's a super fair thing to say, right? The fact that it's disproportionately very easy to do and very hard to thwart, or in this case, as of right now, impossible to thwart. So that's a fair thing to say. Like, I'm all about having the right reasons.
Can I ask a question?
Right?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So before the changes, and I'm not assuming like CCP had some like meta reason to do this change, but before the changes, the previous status quo, do you think there was like enough sufficient counterplay for the defenders against evictions, particularly when you choose the right kind of corporation where you have like 80-90% probability of winning a fight? With respect to how much numbers both sides have, if you do everything right on the whole control side.
No, if you do everything right on the whole control side is the key part of that. No, there is not enough. The thing is, even if like all the defenders have to do is pressure the attackers a little bit and people make mistakes. Let's take the Nomex September 2019 eviction as an example, which was a Keepstar that died in September 2019 that was owned by a very small corp. And when we invaded, Nomex tried to counter our 100-man fleet with 7 people, and because we didn't expect the attack, they took us off guard and they managed to get people in past our whole control fleet. And what's more, on top of that, even without the Frighull mechanic changes, we lost whole control in our own home. We made mistakes in our own home, and then the initiative got in, and we had a huge brawl in our own home. We lost 120 billion caps, and that happened because we made mistakes, because evictions are difficult, and they're stressful, and they require a lot of commitment and a lot of burnout. And at the end of the day, the attackers make mistakes. The defenders abuse those mistakes, and the defenders get a lot of really, like the initiative coming into our home in September, that was an incredible fight. They took advantage of a huge mistake that we made, and they got people into our home. If there were frigate holes that were unrollable back then, like if a Delph frigate hole had spawned in September, they would have just got in. Like, it didn't matter if we'd played perfectly, they would have just gotten in. We're never going to play perfectly. Hard Knocks never plays perfectly.
Okay. I would say, like, given the history of wormhole evictions, it's less likely for the evictor side to mess up wormhole control.
Can I point something out there? So, given the history, yes, but that history.
Let's let Matterall speak.
Sorry.
Well, go ahead and finish your point, and then we're going to wrap up. Go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah. So, if you look at the history of evictions, you can clearly see that in most big, like major evictions, or less. I've been in wormholes for the last 2 or 3 years, right? So, in every single major eviction I've been involved in, as an attacker or as a defender, critical mistakes were made by the side that lost. The reason why attackers win evictions so much is simply because only a few corps do a lot of evictions and therefore are very experienced, whereas you only get the experience to defend one. But if you look at a lot of the big evictions, right, where big groups clash with each other, you can see very clearly that defenders made very critical key mistakes that basically lost them the fight. I wouldn't agree. Like, looking at attackers winning most evictions and saying, yeah, they have an advantage is pretty unfair, because usually attackers are better prepared than defenders, and usually defenders make critical mistakes.
That's understandable, but suppose you have this is a bit like Pando defending his own Stuka, because it takes a lot of effort, and the people fighting against the Stuka aren't prepared or don't know how to fight against it, which could be fair. But overall, on the meta, if you look at the situation where it's too swayed, too lopsided, then you want to kind of say this is out of balance. If you have all the preparation and all the experience, should that get you the license to evict anyone or most people?
I'll finish by saying, and then I'll let Madaro speak, that you're right on Mecha. It was too skewed towards the attackers now, but with the change of the frigate hull, it is even more skewed towards the defenders. There has to be a middle ground that's better for both groups. It's so far skewed towards the defenders.
I'm very much agree with that. I think
so. Yeah, I think we can agree on that point.
Let me bring Exuki back in. What do you think? Exuki, are you still with us?
I am still with us.
Let's talk mechanics. You can take it where you want.
So a couple of things that I just want to throw out there just to kind of set a picture so people have some understanding here. The rolling changes that happened a couple weeks ago, which are directly related to the impact that we're now seeing related to frigate wormholes, so CCP has had a long-standing bug, really, that years ago someone first started reporting that hey, so it turns out I can play with my mass after I've actually pressed jump. And so what the game was doing is it checked to see if you fit, and then when you actually went through the wormhole, it calculated how heavy you were. And the reason, I'm going to go a little deep here just because I think it's important that people understand exactly what that meant. And then now that that's changed, the impact it's having. From CCP's point of view, this was a bug. They could even say an exploit, although I'll use that word cautiously simply because no one's going to be getting banned for using this. That's existed for, I want to say, 8 years. I actually don't remember. I mean, maybe Laura or somebody else could chime in if they did remember exactly when that change was introduced, because it actually wasn't there when Apocrypha first shipped. Something done to the game at some point made it so this was possible. Wormholers, being the crafty EVE players we are, discovered things that we could do with this, so that it turns out I could jump a wormhole and make my ship heavier than it was before, using a prop mode and things like that. I could fit wormholes that normally my ship would that my ship might not have fit using bubbles. You could so when frigate wormholes were added, I could shrink my ship using the previous interdiction warp generators to make my ship light enough to fit. Fast forwarding to now, CCP felt that they were getting there was volume of people actually still reporting this bug to this day. New players were joining, coming into wormholes and going, this just doesn't feel right. It feels kind of strange to me. So when they were doing Guardians with the Guardians Gala and the From Wormholes with Love patch, on the to-do list was to try to tidy up wormhole space, and this was, I don't know if it was really their top priority, but this was a bug of high importance that some people wanted to fix. I think that CCP may have underestimated the impact that fix would have, but they changed it nonetheless. Where that leaves us now is some wormholes are now harder to close than they were before. C1 space is disproportionately feeling it, and their wormholes are almost impossible to roll now because of how big the disparity of how large the wormhole is and how tiny things you put through it are. And frigate wormholes are completely unrollable in their current state. I don't want to continue a discussion on whether that's good or bad. The only thing I would note, just so I can at least say that I have said this so people understand, CCP always intended frigate wormholes to be completely unrollable. It was their introduction was specifically to connect two systems and go, you are irreparably or irrevocably connected for the next 16 hours, but only tiny things can move back and forth. As we've already seen, we could have a discussion on whether or not that's good for a very long time, but I think it's important for people just to understand that CCP's opinion is that this is now working as intended. That's not to say that I'm done talking with them about it. I think there's a lot of devs that are carefully watching this weekend probably, as well as Wormhole Space in general, to see, rewind a week and a half when this happened. Lauro, I know, is one of the big people standing up on a soapbox, maybe because... Excuse me. Maybe because they knew that this weekend was coming up, and they were hoping it could get fixed before then. But a lot of wormholers, raised up this flag and said, "Guys, this is gonna ruin evictions, or it's gonna fuck everything up."
What do you personally think, Exuki? What do you personally think about the frig holes? I'd like to hear it.
So, I don't think I'm somewhat not completely opposed to the idea of two systems being connected and there's nothing that you can do about it. And I would say that I think that I'm not saying I'm a huge fan or proponent that I think that Wormhole Space will be better off with giant fleets from nullsec constantly coming in and third-partying or joining one of the sides in all sorts of things going on. But I do think there's also some merit to, I think, what some of the devs' main points will be when we bring this discussion back up, that conflict was had over the course of this weekend that would not have existed without these holes existing. I would say that Rage wouldn't be burning. I absolutely recognize that Rage would not be burning without that frig hole. I would also point out that I think the fights that we had in TDSIN's home system, they also probably wouldn't have happened without the frig hole. Without the ability to get some more people in, both some of our own guys and some of the allies we called into the system, I'm not sure that we ever would have gotten the manpower to stand up and think it was going to be a good idea to throw down the way that we did without that. I'm not going to say, without the frig hole we never would have fight, but I think that the content we're seeing, the fights that we've been seeing, I think this weekend would have been significantly less interesting without them.
Okay. We're going to wrap this topic up. We can go on for a long time. It's very interesting and loved having all you guys and all your opinions on it at the same time. We're going to end with Victor's last comment on this, and then we're going to move on to CSM.
So I would like to point out about the argument that fights are happening because of frig. So the only reason we went ahead with this eviction, even though friggles were a thing, is because we mistakenly believed that they could still be rolled by 100, 150 maximum mass destroyers. Now that we know that friggles are truly not rollable and that there is no realistic counter, we won't be doing it. Nobody's going to be doing any big evictions like this again. As long as friggles stay like this, nobody's going to risk leaving their home and doing all the effort for a big eviction like that. So you can also tell the CSM that as long as friggles exist like this is the last time they're going to see big fights like this on such a scale for these kinds of targets. And yes, these fights happened because we didn't expect friggles to be as powerful as now that we know and everybody else knows. Nobody's going to risk it anymore.
All right. Do you want to say anything about that, Exuki, or can we move on to CSM?
I think that's his point's pretty there. It's entirely possible, and I think if it does go that direction, it'll be useful data and stuff to hopefully try to entice CCP into making changes on it. That if everybody stops, evicting and big fights pretty much stop happening because everybody's terrified of somebody else showing up, then I will happily publicly say, you're right, these are terrible, they're making everything worse, and we should get them fixed. My current status is I'll note that I'm not completely sure that we're going to see all the fights stop, eviction stop, and that we'll see. That I'm not sure they're going to be as huge problem, but I'll also happily admit that at this point in time, I can't be completely unbiased in that sentiment, since right now I'm certainly benefiting from their existence. So I think time will tell.
Oh, that was fun, guys. Thanks for the the colorful discourse. I guess it was really interesting to see how wormholers, just act / live / like what their problems are and what their pain points are. So it's super interesting to get that kind of that side and that insight.
Anytime if you have questions, man. Like, we love talking about it as much as you like hearing about it.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate a lot of your insight, Laura Secco. Like, you were one of the wormholers whose names I kind of know. So, and that's about it. That's how like uninformed I am. So, but yeah, it was really cool. Really interesting stuff.
Okay. Sorry about that. I crashed out and had to come back. So the cameras have changed, and that's okay. We'll get that fixed.
Now I'm on the left.
Yeah, that's all right.
Exuki was right, but not anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So Olmeca's still here with us, right, Olmeca? Olmeca, are you there?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. I'm in the dark here, but I'll be cleaned up in a second. Let's talk about the CSM Summit and what that was like between you and Exuki.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He did a presentation. I did a presentation. I think overall we're very optimistic about the way the game is, or more optimistic than the first summit.
Okay. So what? Okay, the big deal here is it seemed like, at least from what has been publicly said so far on the Meta Show with the Goon Swarm representatives, was that, hey, CCP actually understands the game, and hey, they proved it to us. We're optimistic. Is that a fair way of representing what they said?
Yeah, can you give me like 5 minutes? I'm really busy right now. I'm sorry about this.
Don't worry. Exuki, take it from there.
I got this. So I was actually pinging some different devs earlier this morning to try to find out if there were things that I could and couldn't touch on, even on a very high level, so that we could try to speak to. I got some answers, I got some no's, I got some yeses. So me and Olmeca can probably poke into a couple more of them. I would say that, the very first line I'll open up to everybody, just that I left the summit with a very positive opinion of what 2020 is going to look like for EVE. I left the 2019 summit in September with a significantly less one. I think I defined my 2019 one as cautiously optimistic. I am fully optimistic after this one, not even cautiously. Unless they completely deviate from the plan that we saw and we talked with them about, I think EVE will be in a much better place in the next several months. We've got a lineup of great changes that'll help shake up things, change the meta, give some players some things to play with, and I think that all of that's going to be good for EVE overall. The minutes will probably be coming out, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. I'll note they might feel a bit more redacted than usual because we touched on a lot of things that I believe CCP's plan was to announce or be showcasing stuff at FanFest. With FanFest being canceled, I don't know exactly what their plan is for how and when they want to announce that stuff, but it's pretty likely that the minutes will be out before they've actually announced it. So you might be seeing more sessions than usual that are, NDA for the moment until CCP actually announces them. and so hopefully that's going to be cool.
Now, do you think a lot of these, as Matterall said, like the most of what I've been hearing is that CCP have recognized a lot of pain points and a lot of issues, and they're going to address that. Do you think a lot of that comes from, or any of that comes from, the fact that they're able to play the game at like a higher level now, or is it just like a happy coincidence?
So, I think there's probably a little bit of that making progress. I can't comment with any specifics. I talked to a lot of devs that still aren't playing, even with the changes, ones that I thought would have, dove in. So I don't think it's fair to just say, well, we made that change. Now all the devs actually know what they're doing and the game is better. There are some organizational changes that Helmar and the CCP has made to enable the company to be much better suited for the work they're doing, I think. And I think my 2 cents is that's most likely where a lot of the productivity and positivity we're coming from is stemming from. The company was not organized in a manner with the right people in the right places that I think was really best for Eve's success, and I think they've maybe not perfected that, but taken steps towards getting that better. I would say if you felt like overall the last 3 months have been good and getting better, you're going to be blown away by what they're doing. It's like they've figured out something that works and they're steamrolling it through the whole company. So I think you're going to see more content quicker. Hopefully that's going to be getting iterated on, and then hopefully it's going to be received well. I don't want to. I can't promise anything. But another big change, like in September, we showed up and the CSM said, "We'd like to see the roadmap. What is the plan? Where are we going?" There really wasn't one. So there is now. We got to see a roadmap. So like I can say the CSM has a pretty good idea of everything happening and coming out for the next 2 to 3 months. We have a slightly less exact detailed vision, but an idea of what's happening over the rest of 2020. Helmar and CCP have a plan. They have a vision, and I'm fairly positively optimistic that if they follow it, that I think, in 6 months we'll be saying, wow, Eve's doing good. Things are fun again. I'm amazed to think that, at the beginning of this year, we were still worried that our game's dying.
All right, so a lot of doom and gloom is kind of going away, and it does kind of feel that way, at least in the online communities that I'm. As you said, the last 3 or 4 months, it does seem like there have been some either tweaks or changes that are good, or at the very least, not bad, right? So most people have a pretty good opinion, or a pretty high opinion of the changes. I think the one exception is probably resource redistribution, where people are more afraid of not knowing what's coming rather than hating the change, right? Because I think we all agree collectively that resource redistribution is probably something that needs to be done in EVE Online to keep it a healthy game. But that's a really good take, and a really really good news to hear. And it's interesting that a lot of it's coming from like an organizational change rather than anything else. So.
One other thing that I just want to share, I'm only going to touch on it at a very, very high level, but it's something that I think is too good to not share. And I also don't want to steal the wind out of any of the dev sales who are hopefully going to be jumping on this soon. At Vegas, CCP Burger got up and had actually several times in 2019, CCP got up and had a relatively gloom and doom presentation about player retention, who's trying Eve, who's staying in Eve, who's, learning and bailing, falling out, all that stuff. And for months, a lot of 2019, the veteran player base kept hearing, we're focused on new players right now. We're focused on new players. Everything's on the tutorial, the NPE, the UI, making everything better. There's some things that have probably you've noticed. I don't know if you've ever seen the red dots that the UI has now.
No, I've never noticed them. Very unintrusive.
So there's these red dots to let you know when there's stuff going on. The only thing that I've been given permission to really state on this topic is actually Camille's saying, all right. CCP invested heavily in making more people try Eve and making those people trying Eve stick. I think a lot of people, including a lot of the CSM, sat around and said, like, we've seen this before. CCP invests a ton of time and money and energy into this, and it goes nowhere. It's early. They've figured something out. I cannot touch on specifics, but I would just say, and because for me, this was the most exciting thing at the summit. There are more people trying Eve than ever before, and more of them are continuing to play Eve than ever before. CCP showed us charts, we saw data sets, and we saw timelines. And I'll let you fill in some of the blanks that I'm intentionally leaving out here. The future of Eve, given their projections and what the changes they've made, are foundationally exciting. I think is I can't overstate it, but I also can't scream at some of the data, like the specifics that I've seen. It's going to be good though.
So we're if I'm to take this the right way, reading between the lines, we're finally stealing people from World of Warcraft. That's what I'm taking. It's not new markets. It's not emerging player groups like Koreans. We're just stealing all those World of Warcraft players back.
Well, it goes with what Hilmar was saying, that they knew there was interest out there. They needed to clean that funnel so that more people would stick around longer. And it sounds like both those things are still true. And now one is happening since they focused some attention to the funnel.
And that's really good. I've spoken a lot with CCP in the past on the CSM and just through other just random venues. And I got to targeting once at FanFest to their old marketing who this was a long time ago, so he's not there anymore. CCP Manifest, and he said, "Yo, it's so well." He didn't say "yo." He's nice. He's
editorializing,
more well spoken, but he was basically saying, "Hey, it's super easy to show the world EVE Online and to say, hey, there's this really cool space game. There's not another one like it, really. They've got amazing stories. Come and try it." But the hardest part has always been to get them to stay for more than like 72 hours. But we all know that once you stay for like a certain amount of time, be it 3 days, a week, a month, once you get that bug, you're kind of hooked for a very long time. So like the marketing aspect of EVE Online was always easy. It was just the retention part that was. So it does feel like this time around, according to what Exuki is saying, that they nailed the retention efforts. Because we've seen them like reinvent the NPE a few times and stuff like that. But
yeah, it also, Carneros makes this point, you can only really introduce the game a couple times to someone before they're like, I tried it a few times and it's terrible. There are people who have stories that come back a third, fourth time and then saying, oh, now it's stuck. But you want to be careful when you do mass advertising. Is the game ready to absorb those kinds of players that you're attracting to the game? So anyway, that's good news. We did lose Omeka because he is doing some things that we can't talk about, but we should probably know
he's
that
probably having a party in Dell.
Know that if he can come back, he will. So is there anything else, Exuki, from the summit that it was a relatively quiet summit that just showed some pictures and stuff, but we saw a lot of positivity coming out of you guys. So, I mean, what you just told us is a really, really big deal?
I mean, a couple other things that I'll touch on. Some of the negativity that some of the CSM had going into the summit was, there's some. As a part of that organizational changes that I mentioned, there are some devs that many of the CSM or probably a lot of players have either never met before or only interacted a bit. You had a couple, you've had some of them on the on your show recently that are, we haven't interacted with them a bunch, and they've got visions, they've got a plan, and like the resource depletion and the ore changes that they've come out and said, here's this big thing. A lot of the CSM went to the summit, I think, with concerns that they had already made up their minds about where they're going, and probably more importantly, how they're going to get there. We had a lot of chats about a lot of different things, and I would say that I feel like, and maybe it's just because we were doing the chats in person, we were able to make serious progress with a lot of these devs. I had chats that, during the wormhole session, for example, as we saw in the picture, that room was full. There were a lot of devs there. There were a lot of devs taking notes. I don't know what they were scribbling, so I don't know if I need to be worried or not. But there were a lot of notes that were like making their lists of things that they like. I don't really like what I'm hearing. I'm going to fix that, or that sounds great. We should push on that more. And so, but there were some places where the CSM and CCP clashed, and we really disagreed on whether or not this is or isn't a problem, or how they wanted to go fix it. I felt like the majority of the points that we wanted to hammer home to them, I think we hit those. There were several times I saw the devs' eyes just kind of finally light up, and they got it, for lack of a better word. Time will tell how far some of those go, but I was far from the only CSM that gave a presentation this time. Villy gave some, Gobbins gave one, Olmeca gave one. A lot of CSMs got up and talked about their things that they wanted to teach CCP about, and I think that a lot of that went far in helping CCP understand their game better.
There's a question here. I'll just read it to you. What change is most promising? That is from Astrophobically. What area of change is most promising in your opinion?
So slightly cop-out answer. One of the other changes that I'd probably be most excited about is one that I can't speak to until CCP also makes that announcement. But recapping the point I already made, I think the implications of a much improved player funnel and player retention is going to be big for the future of EVE, and I'm very excited about that, and I think it's very promising.
Loka, did you have something?
This is just a sort of general, because with the CSM, I'm on the outside as well, which is, it's a nice position to be in because you can sort of look at what's happening and how it feels. And I've really got to say, like, this last year, it's felt so much closer to the community somehow. I feel like we've been quite fortunate with the people that we've had on CSM, just in general, because I think, especially from a smaller community such as Wormhole Space, right, where there's quite a small percentage of players, you don't tend to get a huge amount of input in things. I think the fact that we've seen changes come to Wormhole Space, some of them controversial as we know, but that's not the fault of the CSM. That's actually, we've got changes that are happening, and that's a productive thing. I think CSMs have really had a hard time of it, because every time a negative change comes to the game, the CSM gets the bad rap for it, right? Because we all go, okay, EXO, why is this here? What are we doing? What's going wrong here? And we lay that on you. But generally, just an observation from my perspective, and I know a lot of people across Wormhole Space and in it share it. Just a thank you for the work that you've been putting in, and it's nice to hear that there is positive changes coming in with the summit and things that are upcoming, and I feel more excited now to be playing EVE than I've felt in a few years. So this is, I'm really looking forward to it. Just wanted to share that with you directly.
Good stuff. Okay, we're going to switch gears one last time for a quick segment about some changes that we've seen somewhere. I'm going to introduce Fonsway. How are you doing, Fonsway?
Good day, afternoon for most people, I think.
Yeah, I know the show is going long, but it was worth it, well worth it. But can you tell us like what you found, and maybe you guys can comment on it?
Yeah. So actually, so what I have to talk about kind of dovetails very well into, at least on a high level, what Exuki was talking about. CCP is changing Eve very drastically and very quickly. They're on every individual level. So what I happen to notice, and I'm discussing now, is a piece of content that they're going to be adding that kind of changes the way things work. We have noticed, which I believe was accidentally published onto HoboLeaks, was an Allied Empire conglomerate faction, new faction with standings, and a test faction for Triggs, again with standings associated. We can theorize as far as what they intend to use this for. Right now, there is an existing piece of content. There is an existing site in which these two groups meet. This faction standings may be added to that or may not be. That may be added to a new site, which is being planned for a later phase of the invasion. So the Allied Empire conglomerate in this case is referring to the groups formerly known, or will still be known as, the retaliating Empire entities, the retaliating Caldari, retaliating Amar, which is what you find when you go to the observatory flashpoint combat sites that are part of invasions. When you go there, you can choose to fight with the empires against the Druglavians, or you can choose to fight with the Druglavians against the empire. And the empire that you fight is based on where that site is, which empire's space it is in. And it appears that the empires are now no longer fighting independently, but are now fighting together. We don't know where this is going to be added in, but it's coming. And if you actually look on Singularity, a few days after this change was made, those strings were blanked out. So they're being hidden again. What else has been noticed is a whole set of new rats, as opposed to the retaliating Empire entities that we have seen so far. There are now new elite and exalted, and I think weak new sets of entities. So far, only the Amar have been published, but I imagine we will expect the others to come in soon as well. But this content that we are seeing is different than content that we've seen before. Starting with Abyss and continuing with Invasions, the design of the NPCs themselves has changed drastically. They react to us in different ways. They have abilities that use Capacitor that we can use E-War on, whereas this was unheard of in the past. Just in general, the way they behave, if they can't get in their desired range, they will warp away and warp back. There are all sorts of new behaviors in AI that is being added, being tested in Abyss in an instance environment, and then tested further in the new invasion content, and this will be expanded as well. So these are only some of the large changes that that have been happening. We all know all the other things that are going on, the ore changes, etc., everything else. But this is today's, or this week's this week's particular instance of everything is different.
Pretty cool.
That is very cool. I'm sure I haven't, maybe Exuki knows this a little bit more, but I'm pretty sure CCP hate HoboLeaks. It destroys all their surprises.
I had a talk with Rise about that very specifically, but please go ahead and I'll share that afterwards.
I was just going to note, HoboLeaks is one of the reasons that I think you've been seeing a trend of patch notes being, and even the patch itself sometimes not showing up until the day of the changes. Something that CCP has done that sometimes comes to bite them, I think, a little, is they've occasionally published things intentionally, the HoboLeaks, that are fake. But sometimes that might make its way into production.
Oops. So I had a talk with Rise in Vegas about this specific issue, and I said, we can see a lot of things, and stuff isn't given away directly, but I can look at a rat's attributes, for instance, and I can see if this rat has a maximum orbit range attribute, then I can derive what the AI is going to do from that. So So there's a lot of things that we can figure out and find out. And he said that they're going to move towards a trend of obfuscating stuff simply by the nature of their data design, moving more of it internal on the server side that doesn't get exposed at all, and therefore, because it doesn't get put into the client files, it doesn't get downloaded, it doesn't get accessed, and HoloLeaks doesn't parse it out and mine it out. So that's good. The more that they have the capability to conceal, the more control that they feel that they will have, and the more that they will feel is appropriate, and they are able to put in patch notes. So closing that particular hole is great, but I'm going to use it as long as it's there. Essentially is what this comes down to. They've also put in not necessarily misleading information, but clearly false information. Like, for instance, during the holidays event, before they gave us the filaments, those strings, that any text string that had the name of the reindeer filaments in them was replaced by placeholder text, like it said "ho ho hobo leaks" and things like that. So they know what's going on, and they know how to obfuscate things that are necessary. But it also, the fact that this gaping hole exists means that that has influenced their decisions of when and what to push to even Singularity for their own testing. Because maybe they want to push something quietly, but we're going to see it, so things don't get tested as well as they could. So it would benefit us if they were able to close that hole and then choose, have more control over what gets released and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Francois. Really appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now. Do you have anything else, Elise?
No, that's about it. It was a really fun hearing some different takes from wormholers. Also, thanks to Killa B, who was on the show earlier, giving us a pretty good wrap up of what happened in the north and the takedown of Declan, a region that's only been conquered twice in the history of EVE Online. So, pretty impressive stuff going on there.
Twice or three times?
I think twice.
Oh, twice, because the original Northern Coalition wasn't in Decline.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The North's been conquered, what, 2 or 3 times? 3 or 4 times?
A bunch of times. A bunch.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, thank you all for coming and helping us out. Exuki Olmeca, who had to take off early because he's doing some crazy stuff in Delve, as he usually does. And also, we had a very unexpected guest, but it was a really neat to watch these guys talk to each other. Lorseco and Victor. Lorseco and Victor from HK, and Loka from, well, now Initiative, but he was AFK. That is the group AFK before that. Thank you guys all for showing up today. And Francois, thank you for showing up too and waiting.
Hey, no worries. I had my fun in chat while you guys were talking about serious stuff. I was like busy hitting on people and things. It was great.
Yeah. It was eventful chat today. Also, we got up to over 400, 420, I forget, over 400 people watching live, which is unusually high for us. So credit to you wormholers for that. Everybody's interested in what you're doing.
An interesting game, Wormhole Evictions. The only winning move is not to play.
Reference to 80s movie called War Games and nuclear warfare. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. And thank the audience for showing up. Thank you, listeners. We will be back in midweek and then again next weekend. Until then, see you in space. That's all for this week from Talking in Stations.